Is this truly a sign from the Lord that a big change is imminent?
Of a new ocean. 60 kilometers crack opened up in Ethiopia in 2005.
Every once in a while, the ground beneath our feet reminds us that it is not as solid as we like to think.
It complete with shapes that looked like doves. For many, the glow and timing felt.
For centuries, the Mount of Olives has stood silent, an ancient watchtower overlooking Jerusalem, waiting for the moment Scripture declared would one day shake the world. But now, that moment may be unfolding before our eyes. In the stillness of early dawn, witnesses felt the ground tremble, saw cracks spreading across the holy mountain, and watched a mysterious glow rise from the earth as if responding to a divine command. Prophecy, geology, and eyewitness accounts are converging in a way that demands our attention. Is the Mount of Olives beginning to move exactly as Zechariah foretold? And if so, what comes next? And are we prepared for it? Before we dive deeper, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss the next prophetic update. Now, let's uncover what is happening on the Mount of Olives. At 4:14 a.m., when Jerusalem lay in its quietest breath, something stirred beneath the ancient stones. Something too controlled to be natural, too intentional to be ignored. The Mount of Olives, normally motionless in its vigil over the sleeping city, released a tremor so subtle that not a single seismic instrument detected it. Yet thousands felt it. Pilgrims paused mid-step. Worshippers froze with prayer books half open. Early workers standing on the narrow paths said the ground shifted with the precision of a whispered command. No roar, no rumble, just a single ripple, traveling east to west, as if following a script written long before their lifetimes. Surveillance cameras positioned along the ridge recorded an impossible phenomenon. Hairline fractures forming in real time, stretching along the eastern slope in the very direction Zechariah described 2,000 years ago. Frames showed the cracks widening by mere millimeters, too little for panic, but enough to unsettle anyone who knows prophecy. Israel's Geological Survey later reported nothing unusual. No pressure buildup, no underground movement. According to the sensors, the mountain slept. According to the witnesses, it breathed. Those who stood closest felt something more than a vibration. They felt a shift in the air, a tightening of atmosphere. Like the mountain inhaled, one man whispered. Another described a weight descending on the hillside, not oppressive, but authoritative, like standing in the presence of someone who has waited centuries to speak. And then came the stillness. A woman walking near the Garden of Gethsemane said her feet locked to the ground without her choosing. A tour guide near the overlook felt his pulse spike as the earth seemed to hum beneath him. A young man heading to morning prayers insisted he heard stone tightening, though no one else heard it. Yet nearly all of them shared the same reaction. Their eyes lifted instinctively toward the crest, as though expecting someone to appear. Jerusalem did not wake in fear. It woke in recognition, like a city remembering something it had forgotten. Something ancient, something foretold. For centuries, the Mount of Olives has been silent, its prophecy suspended in time. But that morning, at 4:14, the silence cracked. Not enough to split the ridge, not yet, but enough to whisper the first warning. The mountain is shifting, and Jerusalem is no longer merely observing prophecy, it is feeling it beneath its feet. The first sign had arrived, and the city, though unaware, had already begun to answer. In the days that followed, scientists, hikers, and silent observers all reported the same phenomenon. The mountain was still moving, not in great convulsions or violent ruptures, but in slow, deliberate increments, as though the earth had begun tracing a line it had been waiting millennia to draw. What first appeared as a cluster of shallow cracks became, with each passing sunrise, a pattern too intentional to dismiss. Satellite images taken over a 14-day span revealed a subtle widening along the eastern ridge of the Mount of Olives. Engineers who studied the images expected randomness, irregular curves, chaotic fissures, the natural signatures of geological stress. Instead, they found alignment. The fractures stretched in a clean east-to-west direction, mirroring the very line Zechariah described in his ancient prophecy. The data implied something unsettling. The mountain was unfolding along a predetermined course. Hikers who had walked the trails months earlier returned to find the ground changed beneath their feet. What had once been hairline cracks now dipped deep enough to swallow stones. Some sections had doubled in width in less than 3 weeks. One group described the sound of shifting gravel beneath the surface, a quiet grinding like distant footsteps beneath the soil. They stopped walking, not out of fear, but from the unmistakable sense that the mountain was adjusting itself centimeter by centimeter, hour by hour. Instruments placed along the ridge captured a constant, nearly inaudible vibration, not sharp enough to register as seismic, yet persistent enough to indicate motion. The readings suggested pressure migrating through the rock in a steady pulse, almost rhythmic, almost alive. For geologists, it was a puzzle. For those who knew the prophecies, it was a confirmation. Meanwhile, the mysterious water flowing from the Temple Mount continued its eastward path, embracing the very fault line forming beneath the mountain. It carved a narrow channel down toward the Kidron Valley, moving with an intelligence that defied natural explanation. Water follows gravity, not prophecy. Yet this water behaved as though answering an ancient summons. Its path aligned perfectly with the developing fracture, as if guiding it, illuminating it, completing it. Experts studying the phenomenon used technical language: stress redistribution, subsurface migration, incipient fault activity. But witnesses who stood on the ridge, who felt the mountain breathe, used different words. The earth is preparing, the valley is forming, and in the quiet hours before dawn, when the light skims, the stones and shadows settle into the widening seams, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Mount of Olives is no longer waiting. It has begun to divide. The valley foretold is shaping itself not in metaphor, but in stone. Hours before the tremor rippled through the Mount of Olives, Jerusalem witnessed something even stranger, something that should have been impossible in this season. At the Temple Mount, where the stones normally lie dry beneath the cold night air, water began to seep through the cracks, thin at first, like tears forming along ancient eyelids. No rainfall, no burst pipes, no natural conditions that could explain what witnesses saw with their own eyes. Rabbis who had prayed at the Western Wall for decades stepped back in disbelief. They called it the stones weeping. Pilgrims dropped to their knees, whispering, "Living water, it's living water." For many, it was not the appearance of the water that shocked them, it was the timing. Because as the flow strengthened, the ground beneath the Mount of Olives trembled at 4:14 a.m., as if the mountain and the temple were answering the same unseen voice. And then came the recordings. Leaked footage captured at 3:58 a.m. showed the water shimmering under moonlight. Yet the shine did not behave like reflected light. It pulsed. It breathed. It glowed with a faint, steady illumination, fading the moment the sun rose. Engineers reviewed the footage frame by frame and concluded the glow was not environmental. In other words, not caused by any light source on Earth. The water continued to push outward, forming a narrow ribbon sliding eastward toward the Kidron Valley, the exact direction Ezekiel 47 described more than 2 millennia ago. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally, a trickle growing into a flow, moving the same path the prophet mapped long before modern Jerusalem existed. By mid-morning, analysts arrived with instruments, expecting to find evidence of an underground reservoir or a ruptured line. They found nothing. No leaks, no fractures, no shimmering minerals, nothing that should produce water, let alone glowing water. One investigator finally admitted, off record, the water has no natural signature. It's as if it appeared from nowhere. But those who stood in the presence of that flow said the opposite. It didn't appear from nowhere, a pilgrim whispered. It appeared from prophecy. And if the mountain's trembling was the first sign, then this water, unbidden, unexplained, and impossibly alive, was the second. A sign not carved by human hands or geological processes, but by something far older, far higher. Do not go anywhere. What comes next will shake you even more than the water and the tremor. Long before the sun touched the hills of Jerusalem, another sign emerged, one that left even the most skeptical observers silent. A low hum drifted across the Mount of Olives. It did not echo like machinery. It did not roll like thunder. Witnesses described it as a buried trumpet, a sound rising from beneath the ground rather than the sky, ancient and weighted, as if the earth was remembering something it had forgotten. A security guard stationed near the eastern overlook said the vibration struck his ribs with the force of a heartbeat, not his own. He tried to speak into his radio, but no sound left his throat. Others near him reported the same paralysis, not fear, but an overwhelming sense of presence, as though the air itself had thickened around them. Then came the visions. Several worshippers, sleeping in hostels at the base of the mountain, awoke moments before the tremor, each with the same dream. A man in white standing on the crest, his feet planted upon the ridge, the ground beneath him opening in a line of light. None of these individuals knew one another, none shared a language, yet their descriptions matched with unsettling precision. The figure, the stance, the radiance, the valley forming beneath his feet. On the mountain itself, others witnessed a phenomenon even more tangible. Tiny fissures forming along the rock began to glow, not with fire, but with a soft, rhythmic pulse. It flickered like a heartbeat, steady, alive, deliberate. The glow lasted only seconds, but those who saw it insisted it was not reflection. It emanated from within the stone, as though light was trapped beneath the surface, waiting to break free. No official footage was released. Authorities claimed camera malfunctions, but leaked clips circulated in whispers. 2.8 seconds of light blooming through the cracks, followed immediately by the camera cutting to static, as if overwhelmed. For many, the sound, the light, and the synchronized visions were more unsettling than the tremor itself. Earthquakes can be measured, water can be tested, stones can crack, but a single sound heard across a mountain, a unified dream among strangers, and light seeping from rock. These are things science struggles to name. Jerusalem was still suspended between disbelief and awe. The most unexplainable sign emerged not in stone, not in water, not in sound, but in human bodies. 3 healings occurred almost simultaneously, each documented, each impossible, each echoing the precise moment the earth shifted beneath the Mount of Olives. The first was a woman who had lived in darkness for 12 years. She had long accepted that blindness would be her lifelong companion. Yet as the tremor rippled through the hillside, she felt a sudden pressure behind her eyes, a warmth spreading outward, as if something unseen had reached gently into her skull and turned a switch long fused shut. Light flooded her vision. Shapes sharpened, colors formed. When she opened her eyes fully, the world was waiting. Doctors examining her later could only repeat the same phrase. There is no medical explanation. The second healing struck even deeper into human impossibility. A man paralyzed from the waist down for 7 years, his muscles withered, his nerves unresponsive, felt the ground vibrate beneath him. The moment the tremor touched his feet, sensation rushed upward through his legs like a rising current. He moved one toe, then another. Moments later, he stood. Witnesses say he began to walk, slowly at first, then faster, until he broke into a run across the courtyard, shouting through tears. His medical team reviewed his scans,